to 2019 already. As you can recall, the credit agency Moody's already alerted the bank to serious problems. That was in 2019. And then in 2020, the beginning of 2020, Moody's then downgraded the bank. So the problems at the land bank is not unknown. The big question is, what did people actually do to rectify it?
Yeah, and perhaps we'll try explore that in just a moment. Before we get there, though, help us understand what the implications are. I feel like that's the next obvious question. We understand the land bank to be crucial for farming in the country. The implications could be quite widespread, right?
Remember, in South Africa, commercial farmers produce food on the back of debt. In other words, a farmer have to go to a financial institution, whether it's a bank or a agricultural company, to apply for a loan, a production loan in particular. With that money, the farmer then buys seed, buy diesel, buy fertilizer. They have to pay their workers for the year ahead, and then the farmer hopes for the very best. That the money that they've invested into the land, that money will then result in a product which then can be sold on the market at a reasonable price so that they can make a profit and then at the same time pay back the loan to that financial institution. So the land bank covers approximately 28% of all production loans. Currently, farmers owe banks approximately 200 billion rand. And if you take out a big portion of that money out of the equation, it means it may have a serious impact on food production. The irony is that South Africa at this point in time has very, very good and very favorable weather conditions. And we need to make the most of it. Remember, it was the commercial agriculture that was the saving grace of South Africa during this lockdown period. And given the fact that this pandemic is not over yet, we need to support commercial agriculture. We need to support small-scale farmers to continue producing food. But if they can't access financing, then we have a bigger challenge at hand.
Help us connect the dots here, Christo. I mean, obviously, to get here, people need to have done things or not done things. And that's what's kind of led to this financial crisis. If you were to paint the picture of the food chain and where the dysfunctionality, if you like, actually began, how would you do that?
Remember, the land bank is a financial institution. It gets funding from different sources, and then it makes that funding available to your agro companies. And they act as on lenders. In other words, they know who are the farmers. The farmers will come to them, apply for a loan, and make sure that they then pay back that loan over time. So what has happened was that on the one hand, at Land Bank itself, as you can see in the report, there were people that were not doing their jobs that they were supposed to do. And that for me is a big concern. In other words, it paints a picture of a lack of competency at the land bank. Secondly, a lack of control at the land bank. And thirdly, the bigger question is, why did Treasury fail to fulfill their oversight role? Because ultimately, Treasury is the biggest, or government is the biggest shareholder of the land bank. Then secondly, some of our agro companies must also be held accountable, because if they have failed to ensure that farmers pay back their loans so that that money is to the land bank, then I've got a serious problem with that too. And then thirdly, weather conditions have played havoc over the past couple of years, but the situation has turned around for the better. And that's where government needs to come in. Remember, agriculture is a high-risk business. One year you've got things going well, and the next year there's a drought, or there's a fluctuation in price, or there's some other kind of factor that impacts negatively on your business. And government must then make sure that they have enough reserves to assist the agriculture sector, because ultimately it's the agricultural sector that fulfills a constitutional obligation, which cannot be fulfilled by politicians or by government. And that constitutional obligation refers to the fact that people must have access to food. And that's why all over the world, especially in Europe and the United States, the agricultural sector gets subsidies from the state. And the big question is, why can't the state in South Africa also to support the agriculture sector with subsidies? Because ultimately, we need to ensure social stability through enough food supplies and ensuring that people have access to cheap as well as healthy food.
Yeah, it certainly is a worrying situation. I mean, on top of the 45 billion rand in debt, the Land Bank, we're told, recorded a financial loss that grew by 211% to 2.8 billion rand. And that was for last year. The year before, 2019, 902 million rand in losses. Those are not small numbers by any stretch of the imagination. The question becomes, how far from the brink of a complete catastrophe do you think we are, considering the sustained reliance that we have as a country to agriculture?
The AG has confirmed in its report that the Land Bank cannot continue, or the Land Bank is not in a position to continue as a going concern. In other words, it is already on the verge of collapse. But we need to remember the Land Bank plays a critical role in terms of supplying cheap financing to agriculture. People often think when you give a person a piece of land, that that land in itself will create wealth. That is not true. What we need to realize in South Africa is you need financing, financing, financing on an annual basis so that farmers then, at the end of the day, can utilize that money to unlock the agricultural potential of the land. We have for too long played politics in South Africa instead of focusing on the real issue. How do you finance, especially your existing crop of farmers who are dependent on cheap financing from the land bank? And secondly, how do you ensure that you provide enough financing to new farmers, especially black farmers, who do not have any form of collateral at this point in time? It will be disastrous for transformation in the agricultural sector if we allow the land bank to implode. We cannot afford that because this will lead to a chaotic situation if new farmers, and especially black farmers, cannot access cheap financing. You need a blended mix or a blended mechanism, a mix of grant as well as cheap loans to, on an annual basis, to ensure that farmers can farm profitably. But in addition to that, remember many farmers have long-term crops. Take for example a citrus orchard or a pear orchard. It takes that orchard at least 5 to 7 years to come into full production. If a farmer has made a loan and that loan cannot be paid over a period of 7 years due to the fact that that orchard is not in production yet, then other ways and means need to be found to keep the land bank going. And the big question is, why weren't these things addressed to ensure the long-term sustainability of the land bank?
Yeah. Of course, one expects a ripple effect, and perhaps it's already making itself felt on grassroots levels, excuse the pun. I'm already thinking of things like food prices going up, and that can be extrapolated and have other devastating effects. Do you think we're anywhere near quantifying the scale at which things might get difficult for ordinary South Africans who'd probably feel this, along the aisles in the shopping centers?
Not yet. We were very fortunate during the past year, and I think we continue to be very fortunate in that we've got very good rains, especially in the summer rainfall areas. And we had very, very good crops. Our maize crop, I think it's in the region of 15 million tons. Soya crop also sits at approximately 2 to 3 million tons. And then we had very, very good, very successful citrus season, macadamia nut season, table grapes, and our deciduous fruit season looks very, very promising. And our meat industry is also doing well, given the fact that the drought conditions in many areas have sort of dissipated. But at the same time, we cannot take these things for granted. We must be very thankful that our commercial farmers are producing food at a very, very big scale. And also, people use new technologies. In other words, they get bigger yields out of the same hectares of land that they produce food on a couple of years back due to the advancement in technologies. But government needs to come to the party now to ensure the long-term sustainability of the land bank. And secondly, the bigger question is how do we, as the private sector, correspond or respond? Because we cannot sit back and point fingers at land bank. We also need to take co-responsibility to ensure that the land bank continues to function. But at the same time, I believe that heads must roll at the land bank, especially when it comes to lack of controls, lack of HR strategy to fill strategic positions, and a lack of overall governance and management. Because you cannot blame somebody else for that. That's an internal matter that must be addressed very, very urgently.
Absolutely. It almost feels like we're running on borrowed time. What's clear, though, in the midst of this uncertainty is that the land bank going down is to no one's benefit. Thanks very much for helping us get a better understanding of the situation as it stands. Hopefully there are better days to come. Christo van der Riede is Agri SA's Executive Director. Appreciate your time indeed. All right.